Posted by u/throw_ra_notakiller. My 30F husband Luke, 33M, had a sister, Laura, 29F. We were all close and saw each other 2 to 3 times a month. Almost 6 months ago, Laura fell down the stairs at their family home and tragically passed away. It was a freak accident. There's a window on the half landing, and she hit her head on the sill. I was the last person to see her. I was there for less than 10 minutes, and she was in her pajamas making coffee. I didn't even stay for a drink, and I struggle with how such a brief and meaningless interaction could have been her last. She deserved so much more. My husband and I have only been married for a year, but we've been together for 4 and have known each other for over 20. When Laura's parents found her, they called my husband straight away, and we rushed over. We faced the whole thing as a family. In the days after, Luke started quizzing me. Exactly what we talked about, what she was wearing, where we were standing, etc. It progressed to saying I was providing conflicting information on tiny details he was deliberately misunderstanding and accusing me of withholding information because I couldn't tell him things like what pajamas she was wearing. This escalated quickly but lasted for less than a week, as I lost my cool and made it clear that I was done answering questions. He didn't bring it up again, and I wrote it off as a grief quirk. His behavior was generally that of a normal, grieving person. Last Friday, in front of his parents, he outright accused me of unaliving her. We were all stunned. There was an inquest which recently concluded, and there was never any doubt the verdict would be an accidental passing. He said it was completely obvious and he couldn't believe that no one else could see it. He claims I went through his phone and found his messages with Laura and that I went over to confront her, and things got out of hand, and I pushed her downstairs. I have absolutely no idea what messages he's talking about. I have never looked at his phone. By the end, he was shouting about going to the police and getting the inquest overturned, and how I wasn't going to get away with it. Let me be clear, Laura and I had a great relationship. We all did. I have no idea where this has come from, other than these messages I haven't seen, and even then, I don't think there's anything I could ever see on someone's phone that would drive me to unalive someone. It's just ridiculous. He's been with his parents since this happened and will not talk to me at all. I've had some contact with his mom, but she's not being very communicative. The last I heard, she didn't know what messages he was referring to either. I'm still completely stunned, and I have no idea how to proceed. I made a commitment to be there for him always, and I understand that grief can manifest in strange ways, but part of me feels like my love for him evaporated the second he called me an unaliver, and I don't know how we could possibly work through this. I also really don't want to be thought of in this way, and I have no idea if he has said anything to people we know. I obviously haven't. A brain tumor or psychotic break has crossed my mind, and I suggested it to his mother, and she just said she'll talk to him. Other than the questions before, he hasn't been acting odd. Obviously, he's been grieving, but he seems sane and sensible other than this. I feel like I'm going mad. Does anyone have any advice at all? Update 1. Firstly, thank you to those who helped me access my husband's messages. My husband's iCloud credentials were saved on an old iPad in his office, and I downloaded his backup last night. I have read all of his messages with his sister, and there is absolutely nothing like he describes. There were no crazy or even suspicious messages. I've searched for over 100 terms and scrolled back over years. I saw a side of them both I wasn't expecting, but nothing that explains the claim I unalived Laura over their chats. Nothing to suggest he was cheating, and absolutely nothing to suggest incest. I repeat, no incest. No weird gaps where deleted conversations or a switch to another app would fit. Just siblings making plans, sending memes, and gossiping. They said unexpectedly horrible stuff about a few people, but not me. It was a sort of relief, but it raised more questions than it answered. I sought legal advice, also from Reddit, after posting here. Turns out my options are to divorce him or sit down. I contacted my community mental health team, who said they'd reach out, but made it clear it wasn't urgent. I then called his mom and said that if I didn't hear from him by this weekend, I would get a solicitor and ask for a mental health assessment as part of the divorce. In response, he made a ridiculous post on Facebook, which neither of us have used in years, and everything blew up. I'm going to try to keep this succinct. On Friday night, he made a long accusation on Facebook with new information. He said he'd been planning to leave me for months with his sister's support, and I found the messages, and unalived her. The coroner has reopened the case, and the police are preparing to arrest me, and he needs to make sure people know before the trial stops him from talking about it. It was well written and seemed vaguely plausible. He messaged people links, so it got some attention. We live in our hometown and have a large circle of friends because we've been here all our lives. People I haven't spoken to since school were reaching out to me, asking what was going on. It was madness. In response, I posted the export of his entire conversation history with Laura. I linked to the chat along with a post explaining my side, and noted that I had changed my ex's iCloud and Apple passwords, and that if he wanted them back, he should comment on my post and update his own, admitting that he was lying. He eventually did. When I started getting messages about his post, I panicked, and changing his password seemed important to preserve everything because he'd know I had access. When I spoke to him the next morning, it was clear he wasn't having a mental episode at all, but was claiming one because he'd been caught in a big lie. As soon as he was outed, he called me, clearly drunk, begging and promising to explain everything if I deleted my post. I hung up and told him to call back the next day. He did, after many missed calls and texts, and he tried to bargain and guilt-trip me with his mental health until it was clear the wrong people had seen his conversation. It's hard to describe, but it seemed fake. It was too well rehearsed, and then this morning, when it was clear he was getting nowhere, he blocked me. Begging for mercy and reciting facts about mental disorders doesn't align with someone in crisis with a sincere belief that someone unalived their sibling. The question of why he did all this remains unanswered, and he will not be getting his passwords until it is. The legal advice subreddit said this stuff is technically illegal, but it's beneath a court to take action, so I'm going to count on that because I felt like I had no other choice at the time, and now I don't see any other way to get answers from him. I am desperate and it's all I've got. So there we are. The relationship I have believed was my destiny since I was a teenager has boiled down to petty, convoluted, and vindictive nonsense, played out on social media, for reasons still unknown. My hope for a brain tumor is fading, and clearly tomorrow morning is going to be when I lawyer up and stop posting about this. I am mortified. I have no idea whether some people might believe him, and I still don't know why this all happened in the first place. Sorry I don't have a happier update, and thanks once again to everyone who offered advice. Update 2. Hi everyone, me again. Both times I posted here, it has paid off hugely in terms of helping unravel this mess, so I hope it's third time lucky. For the past few weeks, I've been trying to figure out why my husband suddenly accused me of unaliving his sister, who passed away in an accident at home 6 months ago. It still feels as ridiculous now as it did then. When Laura passed, we found out she had about £3,000 in hidden debt. It was odd because she was pretty open about her finances, but it wasn't out of character for her to overspend, so I hadn't really thought about it since. A comment on my last post prompted me to look more closely at money matters, and a message to my husband from Laura asking about a payment stuck out. I had initially assumed it was about a car issue she'd had a few weeks before she passed, but Luke definitely paid at the garage when they picked it up because we talked about it after she dropped him home. It didn't occur to me when I first looked through. The messages supposedly proved I was an unaliver, so I had been looking for something scandalous. The message about the payment was the only clue I had at that point, and I had no idea what it meant, so I took a chance. I told his mother I knew about the money and that if he didn't get in touch with me that day, I would make sure everybody else did too. He called me straight away and asked me to come over to his parents' house to talk. He looked dreadful, and the first thing he asked me was whether I was happy now that all of his friends hate him. I told him I didn't care about his relationships and that I was there for answers. It turns out my husband told the coroner's office that he was secretly helping Laura pay some of her debt because she was embarrassed and struggling to keep up with her lifestyle. I assume it didn't seem suspicious because her passing was clearly an accident, and that's what they were investigating. In reality, he took out loans and store cards in her name, and she somehow found out a few weeks before the accident. Some guy he works with had apparently done it before and arranged it all, and if Laura hadn't found out, he claims they could have had it written off without her ever knowing. When she did find out, the guy left him high and dry, and he had to pay it off. I'm inclined to believe that's the gist of what happened, but I am shocked my husband would do something this stupid. When she passed so soon after, his brief and apparently genuine suspicion was that she had told me about it that day, and we argued and I had pushed her down the stairs. He couldn't explain why I would unalive someone because they were a victim of fraud, but according to him, he felt guilty in the immediate aftermath, and his brain made it fit. I mostly believe this, but he tried launching into more weaponized therapy speak at that point, so I cut the topic off. A few months after his sister's accident, Luke received a letter from a credit company, not even the police, saying he was being investigated. Laura didn't have much, so her debts, which were less than £10,000 even with the fraud, were mostly written off. Something obviously flagged against my husband during that process, I don't know how or why. When the letters got more threatening, he believed the investigation would reopen the inquest, and that he would be accused of fraud, perjury, and because of his previously unknown motive, possibly causing his sister's accident. He claims the only thing the company investigating him actually knows is that the fraud came from our address, so accusing me would make it impossible to prove because it would be a coin toss, his words, as to which one of us took out the credit in Laura's name. That was worth our entire marriage to him, and my reputation in the community we have been part of for our entire lives. He says self-preservation kicked in and nothing else mattered when he thought about what could happen to him. When I asked him how his witness statement fits into his plan, because it proved he lied either way by acknowledging he knew about the debt and paying it, he froze for what felt like a million years before saying he hadn't thought of that. Obviously, my response was to ask why, if he hadn't thought of it. He specifically said it was a lie he needed to cover earlier in the conversation. Suddenly, he's sobbing, and his parents are rushing in to ask me to leave. I was in tears at this point, asking how he could do this to me over something so stupid and how much his parents knew about this, as his mom was pushing me out of their house. All she said was that she couldn't have this conversation with me. She was crying too but wouldn't say another word. I am now 99% sure he was trying to frame me. Not for her accident, but for the fraud. He was going to claim that he was lying for me in the coroner's interview, right? If he wrapped it all up as quietly paying her off on my behalf and then genuinely suspecting me of unaliving her, it would protect his reputation and point the finger at me. It just doesn't make sense any other way. Is my husband trying to frame me to weasel out of his actions, and how do I get to the bottom of this? I'm obviously open to theories because Reddit is the only reason I got this far in the first place. Editor's note. Op's account is now deleted after this last update, but she mentioned in a comment that her husband was a habitual user of coke, so it's likely illicit substance related.